Why I am afraid of truckers. Hello all. Just wanted to share a story here that happened to me 2 summers ago. Just a little about me before I talk. I was 18 at the time and had just started college. Living out of state on my own for the first time. Had a pretty sheltered life. I am also a female. So, my first semester at my out-of-state college had just ended. It was May, and I was on my way home for my brother's wedding. I'm about an hour away from my current residence with a little over 3 hours left of my trip. Everything is going great, and I'm just cruising with the traffic. It was a notably busy day for that particular stretch of interstate, somewhere on I-40 and TN. As I said, all is well until I check my mirror. There is a truck a little farther back from the side of my car in the lane next to me. I can see his headlights in my passenger side mirror. I look up because even though it's in the middle of the afternoon and super sunny out, this dude is flashing his lights at me. I try to brush it off and assume he just wants to get into my lane, so I try moving. He stays behind me the whole time, not letting any other cars between us. He keeps flashing his lights at me, and I look up at him. He waves and honks. This was a red flag, but I took it the wrong way. I'm like, oh shit. I wonder if he's signaling me to pull over. I hope nothing is wrong with my car. The only reason I think this is because the week before I was leaving I had gotten a hole in my tire and had it patched. I was worried that the patch had fallen out and that my tire was going flat as I traveled at 60 miles per hour. I'm freaking out about my car and plan to pull off at the next exit. Fortunately, it comes up quickly and there's a gas station with some customers visible from the exit ramp. I head there and pull up at a gas pump. Curiously, a trucker follows me off the interstate and into the same parking lot, but he parked in a designated truck zone. I get out just before he parks and walk around my car doing a quick inspection. I see him start to get out of his truck, and I decide to buy gas, even though I filled up before I left. As I swipe my card to pay for my gas, the truck driver had reached my car. Lucky for me, since I was already pretty freaked out by him following me off the exit, I had my phone in my hand with 911 already dialed, so I would just have to hit the call button. I left my driver door open and stayed between that and the gas hose. Him standing a few feet away from the back end of my car, the hose separating us. The first thing this guy says to me is, "Well, aren't you a pretty tang?" I'm screaming in my head now, imagining all possible scenarios for an emergency escape. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s and about 170 pounds. Me, 18, 125 pounds without much muscle or fat anywhere on me. I wouldn't have been able to fight back much. Anyway, I tell him thank you. He offers to buy my gas, and I decline, saying my parents gave me money. I was actually worried that he would expect something in return if I had taken his offer. He asked me questions like, where am I from, where am I going, etc. Something went off in my head that just said, lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie like a motherfucker. And so I did. Didn't tell him what college I really went to, where I was really headed, what I was doing. Nothing. My gas was done pumping after 1 minute, a whole $12. And with that, I told him goodbye, jumped in my car, and got the fuck out of there. I kept an eye on him as I left, making sure he didn't follow me any longer, and he didn't. Never saw him again. I don't know what he wanted with me that day, whether it was just to tell me how attractive I was, or if he had something much worse planned. I really regret not reporting him to the police. Since this incident, I've always been leery of truck drivers. TLDR, sketchy truck driver follows me to a gas station, asks where I'm going, tells me I'm putty, and wants to buy me gas. Fucking scary, man. A semi-truck driver may have saved our lives. Long-time lurker. I have quite a few stories to tell, and this was the most prevalent to me. This was a story I grew up hearing my mom telling me. I was really young when this happened, and I know for a fact it was before I was 5. I only have some foggy memory of the event, especially because my mom at the time didn't want to freak me out. Some context first, we have a family, like, all over the country. I remember spending so much of my childhood just on road trips from state to visit family. So we know our ins and outs on traveling. 2, when I was a child, I would randomly hug strangers and tell them I loved them. I was so filled with joy and love that it just spilled over onto other people. There was basically only one stranger. I never immediately latched onto the second I saw them. And this is that story. So my mom was taking me to visit some relatives while my dad was staying at home with my brothers. She had to go house sit, and in general is a better caretaker of me than my father, so it made sense that I went with her. We were driving for hours until we finally hit a rest stop and got out to use the restroom. Now, there was already this guy in the parking lot, and according to my mom, it looked like he was watching everyone who was entering and leaving the rest stop. The second we got out of the car, he did too. My mom held my hand as we head into the restroom, but immediately picked up on the fact I let go of her hand to hold her other hand, the side of her away from the man. Now, looking back, she told me that it was clear somewhere in my tiny child brain I picked up some sign of danger because I avoided the man as much as I could and would quicken my pace to the restroom and car. I never did that with another stranger ever again. I had never blatantly avoided another adult like that. Anyways, we do our business and head back to the car, and the man had gone back to his car and watched us leave, only to then follow us in his own car. My mom immediately realized what was going on and tried to shake him off on the highway. He wouldn't budge and tried to get as close as he could. Apparently, while doing this, a semi-truck driver noticed how frantic and off she was driving and could see her looking back at his car. He realized what was going on and drove up to her side and kind of made eye contact with her, and they were on the same page from then on out. Turns out the driver called up on his radio to other truckers and told them what was going on, and a bunch of drivers from different routes nearby came onto the same highway we were traveling on. A few minutes later, they began blocking out the guy's car and essentially trapping him away from my mother and I as she turned onto an exit to get off the highway to another rest stop as the originally truck driver followed us in. He got out and talked to my mom and told her he picked up what was happening, asked us if we were okay, and drove with us to a Burger King and got us something to eat. We talked, and he followed us back onto the road until eventually we went our separate routes. So to the guy who probably was going to try to kidnap my mom and me, let's not meet. To the truck driver, who probably saved our lives, thank you. Red cab trucker. This night occurred about 7 years ago on my way home from my parents. I was 22, young, naive, and dumb. I had just moved into my first apartment. I was the first of my family to move away from our sleepy old train town that I grew up in. So I went home every Sunday to visit with the family, but mostly to do laundry and eat Sunday dinner. I lived about 45 to 60 minutes up the highway, so I generally headed home by 6. On this night in particular, there was a summer thunderstorm that had been pouring down rain relentlessly all day long. My cousins dropped in just as I was packing up to leave after dinner, so I ended up sticking around for a few more hours to visit. I left my mom's around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain, and this was the first time after moving from home that I encountered something that truly scared me. I don't know why I never told anyone about this. I think it had to do with pride. Everyone always gave me trouble about living alone as single female in a newish area. Anyway, here it goes. I left my parents around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain. Side note, I hate driving in rain, so I'm driving down the service road that leads out of town and eventually turns into the on-ramp to the highway. As you're leaving town, the service road turns into one lane right in front of this quarry train loading station thing. I'm not really clear on what that place is. It always gave me the creeps. If you're unfortunate enough to pass through when a train is crossing the road to load, you'll be stuck there a while. Once the road passes the tracks, it turns back into 2 lanes and goes up a steep hill. As I'm approaching the quarry, I can make out the orange lights on a red cab 18-wheeler sitting in the quarry parking lot. Mind you, it's pouring rain. Visibility is low, so I can't make out the trucker until I'm pretty close to him. As soon as I could make out it was a trucker, it pulls out into the road. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting the trailer on the back of the truck. I skid around on the road until I regained control of the car. Thanks for the driver's ed classes, Mama. So now I'm stuck behind this dummy that just pulled out without paying attention, I assume. I keep my distance behind him because I'm a little flustered. For the record, my headlights were on. So if he had been paying attention, he should have been able to see me. Honestly, with the heavy rain and low visibility, who knows? So I'm behind this guy as we cross the tracks and begin to climb this steep hill. Despite it turning into 2 lanes on the hill, he's driving right up the middle of the 2 lanes. Figured he didn't realize it was 2 lanes, so I just putter along behind him, keeping my distance. As soon as he reaches the peak of the hill and the road begins to level out, he moves over to the right lane. Yes, finally. So I move over and begin to pass him. As soon as I get past the front of the truck, he swerves behind me quite abruptly and begins flashing his high beams at me. Usually, when someone flashes their lights behind you in our area anyway, that means turn on your lights. But mine were already on. I checked as soon as he started flashing at me. Weirded out, I put my blinker on and safely changed lanes to get out of his way. He follows my lane change and begging's laying on his horn. Ho-wink, honk, 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 honk. The honking startled me, and I began to get a lot more flustered. What the hell did this guy want? I moved out of his way. My headlights are on. So why didn't I just speed up and zip away? You may be asking. Well, I grew up in this area. It had been raining heavily all day long, and I know that the service road floods a little in heavy rain, both on the shoulders and in random spots in the middle of the lanes. It's a small Midwestern town. Our roads are shitty. I had already skidded and nearly wrecked once. I wasn't about to floor it on this bumpy service road that floods and risk wrecking again. There is nothing between that quarry and the highway. About 4 or 5 miles of wooded area. If I wrecked, it would have been just him and me. So this went on for the next 4/5 miles to the highway. He began tailgating me in addition to the high beams and honking. Once the tailgating begins, I'm in tears. I don't know what this guy wants from me. I'm trying to stay out of his way and get home safely. That's all I wanted. I changed lanes 2 more times, making 3 total. He followed me from lane to lane. As we approached the highway, I floored it. He couldn't accelerate quickly enough to keep up, and I lost him. Finally, as soon as I realize I've lost him and I'm safe on the highway, I just lost it. I was a hysterical wreck. There is only one exit after getting on the highway to stop in the small town the highway runs through. After that, it's all wooded for a good 30 minutes. I thought about getting off at that exit just to calm down and pull it together, but I just wanted to go home, so I sped right past it. I should have stopped. Once the city was no longer visible in my rear view mirror, I was much more calm. I managed to scramble my cell out of my purse and put it in my lap, just in case. The rain led up to a drizzle the further I went. I was still pretty on edge. There weren't many other cars on the highway, and majority of them were truckers. I'm cruising along in the center lane when the truck next to me in the passing lane begins blaring the horn and moves into my lane, forcing me over to the third lane. He continued moving over, nearly forcing me off the highway. I sped up and changed lanes right in front of him so that I'm back in the center lane. Slow down, so I'm in line with the front cab. I double-click the home button on my phone, camera shortcut, and roll down my window. Start taking pictures of the cabbie. I think the flashes made him realize what I was doing, and he began slowing down until he was behind me again. I got a lot of pictures. I sped up and lost sight of him behind me. I was satisfied I managed to get pics, but I'm just so angry at this point. I pull over onto the shoulder of the highway and wait for him. I just wanted to get behind him so I could get a pic of the license plate and report this asshole. Sadly, he was onto me. For sure. I noticed headlights behind me. A long ways back, but behind me nonetheless. On the shoulder of the highway. I waited, keeping an eye on the truckers passing me by just to be sure I didn't miss him. I noticed a shadow pass through the headlights of the truck, which spooked me quite a bit. Did he get out of the cab? I didn't stick around to find out. I just took off and got home as quickly as possible. The pictures were a total failure. It was still drizzling. The flash combined with the drizzle just resulted in washing out the pictures. I could see the red cab, but no matter what filters I used, there was no making out exactly what the cab said. Red cab trucker, you're the reason I have a dash cam in my car. Let's not meet again. There's a reason most truckers don't stop for hitchhikers. You know how in college, or when you're just dirt poor, you come to enjoy certain shit foods? Like ramen, microwave burritos, cheap frozen pizza. I figure it's the same principle with long-haul drivers and truck stops. I'd only been on the road for 2 years before, and I'd only be on it for another 3 after, but I'd already grown a taste for greasy sausages and bad coffee. This time I couldn't enjoy the crappy meal on account of the man sitting 2 booths over. His appearance and clothes were normal enough, if a bit underdressed for the Colorado winter. I think it was the way he stared, scanning the room like the damn Terminator. That creeped me out. And all he had in front of him was an untouched cup of decaf. I usually savored these little breaks, but this time I hurried to finish. Partly to beat the weather, and partly to get out from under those eyes. Before the waitress came with my check, the man took a seat in the booth across from me, without asking. "You a trucker?" He had one of those accents that's impossible to place. "Yeah." "Would you allow me to ride with you?" he said with an off-putting smile. "What? To anywhere? You some sort of drifters?" "I have been for some time, but I'm heading home now." "I haven't been home in so long." "Shit, you don't even know where I'm going." He blinked at that, the first time I'd seen the gesture from him. Then his smile widened.
"Oh.
Going over Vale Pass."
Yeah."
"To Junction. And then Salt Lake." I knew this wasn't the 60s and big rigs weren't held up by the mob anymore. Even still, I figured if he asked where I was headed next, I'd lie. "You are definitely going where I need to go." "I'd very much appreciate a lift." "I'd like to help." That was a lie. But I'm not really supposed to pick up hitchhikers. "Company vehicle, see." I'm not sure how long the waitress had been there, but enough, I suppose, 'cause she leaned in and whispered, "Please take him out of here. I'll comp your meal. But he's been here all day eyeing me funny. Please." Never have learned how to say no to women, so I sighed and told the stranger to follow me. "What's your name?" I asked as he took a seat. He shifted his weight and said, "We don't need to know each other's names." Then added, "Call me whatever you'd like." "Fine by me," I said, not curious a whit about his name or story. I eyed a piece of jerky on the dash. "How about Jim? If you'd like." "Sorry," I said after a few chilly minutes of uncomfortable silence. "The heater doesn't work all that great." "It'll be nice to get home," he said. "It's so much warmer than here." About that time, the snow started coming down real thick, and I cut my speed in half. Another rig, thick chains on the tires, was tearing down the mountain. Clearly none too happy to be stuck behind me. I took the next pull off, and the driver flashed his hazards in thanks. "What are we doing?" asked Jim, after the familiar hiss of the air brakes quieted. "Checking the weather report." "Strapping up the wheels, maybe." Said Jim, his smile gone and brow creased. Then he nodded. "All right. I suppose that'll be fine." I hadn't asked his opinion, but whatever. My phone was lucky to get any service, but I got my answers. Snow was expected to come in waves for several more hours. On this mountain, weather like that had been the end of more than one long hauler. I wasn't desperate enough for cash to risk it. "I hate to do this to you, Jim," I said, sincere. 4 or 5 hours parked with my new friend did not sound fun. "But we're stuck here." "We don't look stuck. I just mean it wouldn't be safe to keep driving." I'll help you put the chains on," Jim said, his smile back. "Nah, sorry, I don't push it going downhill on a snowy mountain. But I need to get home. It's just a few hours." He shook his head. Empty smile once again vanished.
"You don't understand."
"If we don't go now, I won't make it home until who knows when. It's a place, man. It isn't going anywhere." Jim paused. "Yes, it isn't going anywhere. At least we agreed." His eyes followed a van with a driver apparently braver than myself. "You wishing you'd hitched a ride with him?" I asked. And he squinted, then, almost like he was trying to read the license plate. "No, they aren't going where I'm going." "That's too bad, then, but I'll still be headed toward your home after the weather clears." "No, you won't." I shivered, and I don't think it was the cold. "Don't you have a job to do?" said Jim. I started to get angry then, or maybe it was afraid, but I was shaking either way. "Look, I can handle my own business, Jim. Nothing in this trailer is perishable. If I'm a little late, I'm a little late." "No," he shouted, and I swear for a moment his face barely looked human. "I insist you drive now." He was like a small child, throwing a tantrum. "All right, that's enough," I said, hand ready to dart for the glove box where I kept my Magnum. But I swear Jim's eyes bore right through the plastic, and he knew that I was packing. "Okay," my voice cracked. "I don't like doing this, but you're freaking me out. I need you to leave."
"Now."
My eyes not leaving my passengers, my right hand still ready to grab the gun, I used my left to fish around for a bag, a bottle of water, my spare coat, and a few sticks of jerky. I tossed it all on Jim's lap. The diner's only a couple miles back. Just stay off the shoulder, and you should be fine." He just stared, motionless. I almost wished he would explode again. "This is my truck. I'm telling you to leave." "I won't need these," he said, dropping the coat and bag, but taking the jerky from my dash. He didn't seem angry anymore. Sad, maybe. And then he hopped out. "Wait, it's 10 degrees, I yelled. Grabbing the gun and coat, I darted outside, wincing at the wind. There was no sign of Jim, and his track stopped after 10 feet or so. I considered calling out, but I guess I was too relieved. Maybe that makes me a shit person, I don't know. But I got back in the cab, locked both doors, kept my revolver handy, and didn't sleep a wink until Grand Junction 10 hours later. Now, I'm sure he was just some lunatic I picked up at a diner. I know that. But sometimes on snowy March nights, I can't help but wonder. Sometimes I wonder. There was a pause on the other end, and then the voice spoke, heavy with a mix of fear and disbelief. "You're not alone. We've all heard those stories, the abandoned cars, the creatures in the fog. But we always thought they were just stories." The revelation sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't the only one who had faced those monstrous entities. The radio buzzed with hushed conversations among truckers, each sharing their own encounters with the supernatural on this stretch of road. The stories varied, but a common thread emerged. Those creatures, with their haunting eyes and twisted smiles, were a malevolent force that seemed drawn to the lonely roads in the dead of night. No one knew their origin or their purpose, but they left a trail of fear in their wake. As I continued my journey, the unease persisted. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, and the fog clung to the edges of the highway like a malevolent specter. I couldn't shake the feeling that those creatures were watching, waiting for the opportune moment to strike again. The radio chatter intensified, with truckers exchanging advice on how to avoid the creatures, sharing tales of those who had disappeared without a trace. The fear was palpable, a shared experience that bound us together in the face of the unknown. With each passing mile, the city lights became a distant memory. The road ahead was swallowed by an impenetrable fog, and the radio once again fell silent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. As I approached the familiar stretch where I first encountered the creatures, a sense of dread settled over me. The fog thickened, and the atmosphere grew heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. Then, a haunting realization struck me. This road was a loop, an unending circuit that brought travelers back to the heart of the supernatural. The city lights, the camaraderie on the radio, all illusions meant to deceive. The creatures weren't bound by distance. They were bound by time, forever haunting those who dared traverse this cursed stretch. A guttural growl echoed through the fog, and the twisted figures emerged once again. Their black eyes bore into my soul, their gaping mouths emitting an otherworldly wail. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, the engine roaring in protest, but the truck seemed tethered to the nightmarish loop. As the creatures closed in, the fog swallowed everything, and the road became an unending void. The last thing I saw were those eyes, an abyss that seemed to consume all light. The radio crackled to life one final time, a chorus of terrified voices screaming a warning. But it was too late. The creatures closed in, and the world descended into darkness. And so, the haunted highway claimed another victim, lost to the eternal night and the malevolent creatures that lurked within the fog. The loop continued, a never-ending cycle of horror, trapping the unwary in an unending nightmare. The road stretched on, shrouded in fog, a haunted path that few dared to traverse, and even fewer escaped.